How much do you love yourself? Do you celebrate yourself? Stay with us for a discussion about loving and celebrating yourself coming up on this episode of The Issues. I'm Sarah Thompson, host of The Issues. Thanks for staying with us. According to the Brain and Behavior Research Foundation, self-love is a state of appreciation for oneself that cultivates from actions that support our physical, psychological, and spiritual growth. Self-love is having a high regard for your own well-being and happiness. However, it can be handled differently for each person. Let's hear from licensed marriage and family therapist and author Fellana Randall to share her perspective on this issue.
Yes. In my practice, I focus on the challenges that people face when approaching dating and mating, because the quality of our relationships determines the quality of our lives, both at home and at work. Unpleasant earlier life experiences often cause mental and emotional scars. Family wounds and societal expectations can cause women to feel haunted by loneliness, which is oftentimes worsened by poor self-care practices, unfulfilling relationships, self-comparison on social media, impossible beauty standards, hookup culture, and repeated failed relationships due to rushing romance. And not to mention 24 hours news coverage that tend to amplify guilt and anxiety.
Thanks, Fellana, for sharing your professional outlook. My studio guests today are also professionals who will share some information on this issue of loving and celebrating yourself. I have Matt Creacy, a licensed professional counselor of Avenues Counseling Center, and Kyra Collins, a Master of Social Work, licensed clinical worker, and registered play therapist supervisor. Thank you both for taking the time to help shed some light on this issue. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, to get started, according to News Medical, women tend to have a significantly higher frequency of anxiety and depression in adulthood, while men have a larger occurrence of substance use disorders, and antisocial behaviors, which can trigger inability to love and celebrate themselves. So we're going to start off just asking this question. Matt, do you agree, and why? Let's start with you first.
Well, I would agree, and the reason I would agree is that one, I think both men and women struggle with this, with self-love, right? And because it's a human issue, it's a universal human issue, and it really stems from because your brain works like a sonar, right? You're constantly putting information out into the world, and seeing what you get back from other people, particularly those you're in close relationship with, forms your conception of yourself, the world, and others, right?
Okay.
And so if what you're getting back creates a conception that you're bad, that you're not lovable, that you're defective, that you're not doing enough, it's going to create this negative self-conception, right? And it's going to make it hard to like yourself, to love yourself, to delight in who you are, right? But how that gets expressed is different for each individual, and there are general differences among men and women, right? So from that study that you mentioned, I would say it seems likely that a lot of men would feel like it's not okay for me to express, I feel sad, I feel anxious. So what do? They mask that, they cope with that through substance use, or they hold it, they do what I call the holding the beach ball under the water, and they hold it down until they snap and do things that you would describe as antisocial behaviors.
And you're saying because some of that for men is what they feel that they've been conditioned in society, what they've seen in terms of how to not only they perceive themselves but also express themselves.
Right. What am I allowed to say about myself or what I'm feeling to others? What am I allowed to express? Right.
Okay. And so when we switch over, Kyra, let's talk then about how that affects for women for self-love. I mean, I feel like this is a topic that comes up quite a bit, and we always say I can't even tell you how old since I've been quite young. You have to love yourself first to love other people.
Right.
But talk about the conditions that prevent women from developing self-love.
Right. So just the opposite of men, right? When society tells them that they can't express, all of their different emotions. When a woman then does decide that she wants to express that full gamut of her emotions, she then gets labeled as emotional. And so then it's that just constant barrage of, what can I show? And, if I then don't show you my emotions, now I have to be strong in that and not show you anything, or I'm going to be seen as weak.
And so those can prevent, and so over time, you're just developing you're not being your authentic
No.
self, I think is what you're sort of alluding to.
Right, and you then after a while, you're not sure where your original self is and what that identity is.
Let's talk about, and this is again bringing your expertise when we get into attachment styles. What is that, and then how, and explain how that relates to the topic that we're covering today. We can start with you, Matt.
Yeah, so attachment theory is something that's been around for a really long time. And it goes back to this idea of our brains kind of work like a sonar. But your primary attachments, really, it's a fancy therapeutic way of talking about your close relationships.
Yes.
So typically, first primary attachments are mom and dad, and then as an adult, spouse, intimate partner tends to be your next primary attachment. And the theory goes that the way in which your parents relate to you, the relational pattern, the messages that they give you, shape that self-conception, and then that shows up in the way that you relate to others, particularly your primary attachments as an adult, right? So when we talk about attachment styles, there are general categories of like, if you didn't get certain things from mom and dad, it shows up in the way that you act out as an adult in your intimate part, or if you didn't get this things from mom and dad, you'll end up in this other way. So that's what attachment style, or that's what attachment theory is. So again, when I'm talking with clients about attachment, I say there's two very general needs, emotional needs that we all need from our intimate relationships. What I call autonomy and closeness, right? Autonomy is that sense of I am my own individual person. I have my own thoughts, my own feelings, I exist as an individual entity in the universe. And I'm allowed to go out and explore on my own and do things on my own, right? It's that sense of I'm an I. Closeness is all about I'm a part of a we. That when I'm experiencing distress or I'm upset about something, that people that are close to the other we are going to hold me close and are going to comfort me, right? And so typically, if one of those was either not emphasized or was lacking when we're growing up, it will show up in the way that we relate to our intimate partner. And so that feeling of like I can't love myself, right? If one of those is severely lacking, it's going to create, again, a very negative self-conception, right? And so the idea of like, man, mom and dad never held me close, or anytime I was upset, they'd be like, get over it, stop being a baby.
Right.
Well, anytime I feel anything that hurts, I'm being a baby.
It brings back that. I want to bring it, no, and thank you for explaining that, because I think we hear that, and I think the colloquial term is, were you not loved as a child? People will say those things, but how deeply they truly affect you and your view that you have of yourself. I want to bring in this another one, and Kyra, if you can talk about imposter syndrome, because I was going to try to tie this to also to women and motherhood, but briefly explain what imposter syndrome is, and then maybe relate to how that affects women a lot with their development of self-love or lack of development of self-love.
Yes. So, when you have your different attachment styles that are presented to you in childhood, and then you go through life with friendships and with other intimate relationships, you're trying to figure out, where do I fit in the world with this? What is my place in this? Where is the I, and then where is the we? And in that, when you start to try to figure that out, you're trying to also figure out where do I do that in my workplaces that I'm in, and all the different relationship areas I'm in, work, relationships, school, all of those different relationships that we find ourselves with. And as you go through that, you start to have some of that doubt and shame that may come in. And those messages, right, that you received when you were younger is going to be that voice that's in your head of telling you what that shame and what that doubt is. So sometimes you may have this feeling that we need to do it all ourselves. That type of imposter syndrome is the soloist. We think that if I ask for help, I'm weak. That's the shame that comes in. Or you have that feeling of that imposter syndrome that comes in and says that I have to be the expert in this. And if I don't know all of that I need to know about this topic or this situation or this whatever it is, another part of shame comes in. Another part of that imposter syndrome that comes in is that feeling that you have to be superhuman. So this is where in those relationships where you've had that title of being mom, wife, mother, father, son, brother, all those different things that come in. And then on top of that, adding your work relationships, your intimate friendships, and your intimate partnerships. You're so overwhelmed with what that means that you're trying to be the superhuman of all of those, that the imposter syndrome starts to feed in of, can I handle all of this?
And we almost sometimes, I feel like in our society, it's like these mixed signals, we almost like encourage it, right? It's like, oh, I'm a master multitasker.
Yes.
And I mean, that can really confuse you because the expectation is that you should be almost doing this, or that it's normalized, that it's normalized.
Society has put that on us.
Yeah, I mean, do you feel that most people have, like, I don't think you could break it down percentage-wise, but have a solid self-love of themselves when you're looking out at the population? Do most people say, like, do you confidently feel they think, I love myself. I feel good about myself.
To a certain degree.
Yeah.
Definitely honing in on that and being able to have, someone like Matt or I be able to point that and help you see that more, that love and that feeling starts to grow.
I would agree, and I think do I love and celebrate myself is, I don't know if I would propose it as an either or. I think I would see it's a matter of degrees. And I think, you can have, there are a lot of people that love themselves to a certain degree, but part of loving yourself is also knowing yourself, right? And so it's a sort of ongoing process of having to learn who you are and learn to love and accept that who you are. And so, there's I couldn't give you specific numbers, but I think the closer you get to like the end of that spectrum, like the fewer people you're gonna find.
Right. We've got a lot to talk on. We were talking in this segment really about the conditions that prevent us from loving ourselves, and when we come back, we're going to talk about ways to improve that. So we've heard many reasons why some people are basically unable to love and appreciate themselves, and we have to take a quick break. But when we return, we're going to discuss some of the resolutions for this issue. So we'll be right back after this break. Stay with us.
You know, how you feel on the inside is just as important to me as how you feel on the outside.
Oh, Daddy. I'm grown up, in every way, care and take care of you. You're my grown up, and I know you're there. I'm your grown up, and you know I care. 'Cause it's you and me and you. So when you are okay or not okay, I'll take care of you.
Welcome back. In case you're just joining us, today's topic is loving and celebrating yourself. We are talking to licensed professional counselor Matt Creacy and Kyra Collins, Master of Social Work and licensed clinical social worker and registered play therapist supervisor. Now, they're going to share some of the things that we can do to learn how to better love and celebrate ourselves. And so that's what we're going to kind of focus on in this segment. We were talking in the first half of things that prevent us from loving ourselves, and now some tips and recommendations on how to better love ourselves and develop that self-love. So, Kyra, you want to start things off?
Yeah, of course. So, just basically with everything that's just going on in the world, we definitely need some ways to love ourselves and celebrate ourselves more. The depression rates and the suicide rates are really high right now for all across, age groups and generations. And so, male and female. So we definitely need to make sure that we are doing those things to really love on and celebrate ourselves. A lot of those things that can be done really is just honing in on what it is that makes you happy, what it is that makes you feel calm and feel celebrated. That could be just getting some movement in your day. That could be getting some exercise in your day. That could be journaling. That could be finding your tribe of people, right? And just having those people around you that can love on you as well.
Okay, so we've got physical activity, journaling, and when you say finding your tribe. So I mean, this is a lot. I'm trying to think of if I'm at home and I'm just like not feeling good about myself. My day to day, I wake up, yeah, I get through my day, but I'm just ultimately not loving myself. How do you do that first step? You know, even journaling, it seems easy enough, but sometimes it can be mentally just hard to put yourself in that place. So Matt, what would you recommend is that first step? Like Kyra mentioned getting some exercise. What would you say is just the first step of something you should start doing daily?
Well, I mean, I would, you know, you would be surprised to hear me say you probably should go to therapy.
Right.
But I would say maybe a good place to start is actually thinking about your self-talk.
Okay.
Right? Because what we tell ourselves about ourselves informs what we do with ourselves. So starting with maybe, you know, a mantra of something like, I can do hard things, right? Because actually choosing to do things that are self-love, they're often difficult. Right. And actually one of the things I encourage clients to do a lot of is like, do something that's challenging. Because when you do it, you're actually, one, you expand your capacity to do hard things. And two, you actually experience yourself as somebody that can handle hard things, right? What a lot of times happens, we end up finding ourselves in these reinforcing cycles where things feel hard so we don't do them, and then we believe we can't do them, and it increases that feeling of, I can't do anything, I'm not good, I'm incapable, right? So instead of to challenge that and have what we therapists call a corrective emotional experience.
Yes.
All right, and I appreciate that because it's interesting. We live at this time, and I know if I bring in sort of social media and all this stuff, but even coming back to your suicide point, we live at this time where we're so digitally connected, right?
Yes.
So on the one hand, we can get in touch with each other faster, but as you mentioned, suicide rates are higher, loneliness is higher, and so people just start to lose sight of who they really are. And I mean, I'm sure you're seeing this with your clients, right?
Yes, of all ages.
And for all ages. And so so when you're isolated and alone and you're looking on social media, you're thinking about yourself, it can get low and then it can get higher. Are people aware of this? Like, are they, and then when they start these steps for improvement, are they, how do you become aware of your improvement too, from going from this place of perhaps loneliness or feeling low self-worth to improvement? Are you sort of conscious of it, or how does that work?
Definitely it does take practice over time. Like, right, just doing some kind of one-day self-care spa day thing isn't gonna really do too much improvement. It really is a choosing to love yourself daily type of thing. And so knowing that you're making the steps is being able to kind of look back and say, okay, day one, I wasn't even trying to even get out of bed. But here I am, day two, I've made it out of the bed, I've gotten dressed, I'm doing all those things that I can do to actually love on myself. So it's really looking at day to day, minute to minute, moment to moment.
And Matt, were you gonna add something to that? You're nodding.
Yeah, no, I think that's right on. I think also, again, as a therapist, one of the things we're offering is that your self-conception was formed in relationship with others.
Yes.
So as a therapist, part of our job is to give you that corrective emotional experience that we're relating to you in a different way that helps reshape your self-conception. But we're not the only people that do that. That actually who you surround yourself with, who you choose to spend your time with, are they actually forming a positive self-conception or a negative self-conception? Right. You know, so like, the word toxic people gets thrown around a lot, right? And so I hesitate to use it, but I think it's a good question to go, are the people in my life that I'm choosing to spend my time with, are they actually giving me a positive conception of myself, or are they giving me a negative conception of myself?
Exactly.
I want to, I mentioned earlier in that first segment, that saying that we've all been told that you have to love yourself first before you can love other people. I mean, clearly so many people have said it. There's truth to that, right? And something we all believe in. Talk about that, our ability to get to a point to then be able to properly love other people.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to, like I was saying, finding your tribe. So finding those people that are reinforcing those positive aspects in your life and being able to kind of point out to you, like, yeah, girl, you're doing it. Yeah, dude, you're doing it. You're doing those things. You're doing those hard things. So finding those people that are actually going to be able to uplift you versus kind of, bringing you down back to where you were before.
Okay, all right. Matt, were you going to see your...
Yeah, so, I would say I think there's always this connection between the way I see myself and the way I see others, right? And that bears itself out in what we understand about the brain. It bears itself out in sociology and history. Like, the way we view ourselves affects the way we view. There's this sort of like, again, this in my mind I'm imagining ping pong, right? Yeah. Like it's just back and forth, and right, and it kind of creates this So, I think want to go back to what she was saying, why this is so important, right? Is that your view of yourself actually will also inform the views of others of their selves, which, so again, it's this idea of like, it's a small change for you to focus on yourself,
right?
But that you are a part of a much bigger system, and that little bit of change will actually have a positive impact on the community, the people, the world around you.
Yes.
And once you start to develop that sort of self-love, let's talk briefly about this sort of like being self-assertive, which is especially for women, learning to say no, right? Or overtasking, not overcommitting yourself. Talk about the power of once you start to develop your self-love and have that notion of, have that full sense of self-worth, then the power to, which is hard, to say no, because it kind of goes back almost, putting you back in that position you might have felt before where you feel obligated to do something. So talk about the power in sort of saying no.
Yeah, definitely a lot of times, society has put on women in general, right, that we have to be these, big superhumans that can do anything and everything and have all the labels, right? And being able to say no kind of feels like we are letting down those people around us and almost letting down ourselves. But it's okay. The power, like you said, to say no is okay. So it's almost reminding yourself that it's okay for me to say no to this. But also reminding yourself that if I'm saying no to you, that means I'm saying yes to something that I actually want to do, that actually fills me up and makes me love and celebrate myself more.
Yeah.
It's almost like giving yourself permission to put yourself first, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it seems like easy to do, but it's not. I mean, it's not, because you feel, back to the imposter syndrome, you feel like other people need to have more of you first, right? So you're not being selfish. I mean, this is starting to get, it can get kind of pretty intertwined, but yeah.
Well, and actually taking care of yourself is loving other people.
It is.
Because if you're only concerned about what other people need, to the detriment of yourself, what you're giving them is your worst self. That the reason on the airplane they're like, put a mask on yourself before you put masks on other people, is because if you're deprived of oxygen, you're actually not coherent enough to help them in a helpful way. So taking care of yourself, saying no is actually so that you can give your best yes when you can and when you're recharged. Right? I think that's really actually very important for moms. I see that a lot as well in my therapy, is that moms will say yes, especially to children or family, to the point where all of a sudden they're just like, I'm done.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and then you lose yourself, and then you lose that sense of self-worth. So we've talked about a lot here. I mean, just now talking about the power of saying no, journaling, getting the physical exercise. I know that's a whole other topic of, physical health and brain health, but how the two correlate, but definitely getting some movement in, and therapy. And we're going to have your information before we close the show so people can reach out to either of you about that. So anything else in that area? Those are kind of some good starter tips, though, right? In sort of this developing the self-love.
I mean, I think the biggest thing to really remember in loving yourself and putting yourself first and loving on yourself really is to understand that being selfish, it's not anything has to do with self-care. So self-care is not selfish in any way. It's so that Matt said, giving your best self.
Yeah. And I think one more thing I would add is keep in mind that you're a physical being. Yes. Right? That connecting with people online is great, but it's not the same, because you actually change the chemistry of a room when you walk into it, because you're a biochemical being. And so being in the physical presence of others has far more of an impact than connecting with them online. Not to diminish that and say that's no good, right? But it's not the same.
Right. No, I appreciate you. I appreciate that point. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And before we wrap, we're going to hear again from Fellana, a licensed marriage and family therapist and book author of Becoming the Female Hunter, a modern woman's guide to inner healing and lasting love, with her contribution on how to love and celebrate yourself.
I was inspired to write a book because I noticed the repeated challenges that many modern women face in dating relationships, and it felt crucial to reach more women who aren't able to make it into my office. I use the comparison of the lioness, the female hunter, not to insinuate that this book is about perpetuating a desperate attempt to hunt for love or marriage as if they're a prize to be won, but to recalibrate the masculine and feminine energies in modern love. The lioness is empowered to provide, protect, and nurture the pride, similar to many modern women in our households. The first chapter focuses on self-growth and healing from attachment trauma that cause fears of intimacy and feeling haunted by loneliness. Chapter 2 provides insight into the male psyche. Chapter 3 gives tips on how to generate attraction and flirt. And finally, Chapter 4 provides information on how to deepen intimacy and inspire devotion once you've found someone who deserves that level of respect and admiration from you. And strangely enough, even though it's a book for women, it's inspired many men to better love and celebrate themselves. So actually, Becoming the Female Hunter, The Modern Woman's Guide to Inner Healing and Lasting Love, actually teaches you how to better love and celebrate yourself so that you can trust what you attract and know the difference when it's not for you. Maybe in this next week, think of promises that you can make to yourself to celebrate your physical body, your mind, heart, and spirit. For more information about ways to better love and celebrate yourself, scan the barcode below.
Thanks to Fellana, as well as both of my studio guests, Matt Creacy and Kyra Collins. For more information on loving and celebrating yourself, please see the information on the screen and the QR codes, which you can scan. Those are available. I'd also like to say thanks to each and every one of you who tune in to the issues and share your comments. Remember, you too can join the discussion. Log on to Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. Be sure to tune in to our next edition of The Issues, where we will have another informative topic that you definitely don't want to miss.